Well, welcome students. In these algebra classes, we have spent a lot of time factoring and factoring to find answers for what would work for x, such as in this very first one here. I'm going to look here first and then I'll discuss this other stuff that's up there. If I look at this one here, I would just go choo, 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 choo. X squared, that's an x times an x. There's a bunch of pluses here because I chose an easy one. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6, or 2 and 3. 2 and 3 are going to make that 5, and then what you did here is you said x plus 2 equals 0, or x plus 3 can equal 0. And if x were equal to a negative 2, that would make this equation equal 0, or if x is equal to negative 3, that would also work. So we spent a lot of time doing this. Well, we've always had quadratics that were factorable. That's what we have been given. Not all quadratics can you factor very nicely. When they do factor, that's my favorite method because it's quick, it's easy, it's a little guess and check, and I've had a lot of practice with it. However, sometimes they don't factor nicely. So let's just play with this one that we have, x squared plus 5x plus 6. It does factor nicely. I don't want to use the quadratic on it, but let's just see what would happen if I did. In this case, now a is always the coefficient in front of the x squared, b is the coefficient in front of the x, and c is your constant. So if I had it set up like this, I would say that a is 1, b is 5, and c is 6. I'm going to put it into my quadratic equation. Here's my theorem right here. It tells me that this will give you your answers for x if you put it in this ax squared plus bx plus c form. So let's do this. X equals minus b, that's minus 5, plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. So in this one I get x equals minus 5 plus or minus, that's going to be 25 minus 24, that's a 1, all over 2. This simplifies to be minus 5 plus or minus 1 over 2. So let's separate it. X equals minus 5 plus 1 over 2, which tells me that x equals minus 5 plus 1, that's minus 4, so that gives me a negative 2, which I already knew. Or x equals minus 5 minus 1 over 2, which means that x equals minus 6 over 2 minus 3, which I already knew. So it doesn't matter which way you solve them, you still get the same answers, but I would rather factor. This is my favorite method right here. This is what I would rather do if I can factor them. But we are going to come up with some that you can't factor nicely, so you will have to use the quadratic formula. So let's look at some like that. All right, let's look at this bad boy. We could try to factor him, but it's not going to work. You go ahead and give it a try if you want to. I know I'm going to have to use the quadratic, so in this case, a is 2, b is 4, and c is negative 3. Now, if they give you a problem and it's not in this form, be sure to put it in that form before you select your a, b, and c. So here I go. This equals minus 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared. I'm just going to write a 16 minus 4 times 2 times minus 3, all over 2 times 2. All right, so this is going to give me minus 4 plus or minus the square root of, that's going to be 16 plus 24. And 16 plus 24 is going to give me a nice, beautiful 40 all over 4. Now, this is fine answer. I want to simplify it, though, so I'll keep going just to make it pretty. That 40 is basically a 4 times a 10, where the 4 can come out. then that means I'll have a 2 onto the square root of 10 all over 4. Sometimes this happens where you see how you have a 4, a 2, and a 4. Well, that'll reduce. 2 goes into all of those, so that'll be a 2, that's a 1, and that's a 2. Make sure you divide it by everybody, and I get minus 2 plus or minus, and then that's just a 1, so it's just going to be the square root of 10 over 2. And this would be your answer for that one. This is what x equals. He equals the positive square root of negative 2 plus the positive square root of 10 and the negative square root of 10 all over 2. Let's look at some more. All right, let's say you're given one in this form. You need to make sure that you get it everything all on one side so that we can get it in this standard form so that I can read off the A, B, and the C. So for this one, I would get that A was 1, 2, and a minus 7. Now I'll plug that into my quadratic formula. Minus 2 plus or minus the square root of, that'd be 2 squared, that's a 4. I'm just going to write that down. Minus 4 times 1, I'm not writing that down, and then times a minus 7. All over 2 times A, so 2 times 1. Well, I didn't really need to write that, but I did. So this is going to be minus 2 plus or minus the square root of, that's plus 28, so it'll be a 32 all over 2. And that 32, he reduces a little bit. He is basically a 16 times a 2. Oh, that's not 16. 16 times 2, 16 comes out. And then it'll reduce a little more. So let's look at that. Minus 2 plus or minus 4 under the square root of 2 all over 2. 2 will come out of each one of these terms here, and that's just a 1. And then this leaves me with minus 1 plus or minus 2 under the square root of 2. And these are my two answers for that one. Now look at this messy guy. You need to get everything all on one side, and then I'm going to multiply everything through by a 10 to get rid of those fractions. Actually, I'll just multiply by a 10 first because it is just messy to look at. So when I multiply by a 10, I'll get x squared minus 2x equals minus 5. Moving everything to one side, I get x squared minus 2x plus 5 equals 0. This will give me A, B, and C. A is 1, B is minus 2, and C is 5. Plugging those values into the quadratic formula because that won't factor. Minus B, so I have minus a minus 2. Careful with those negatives. That's probably the most common mistake I see, along with this one where you take negative 2 squared. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, so I'm just going to write that down. Minus 4 times A, which is 1, and then times C, which is 5. All over 2 times 1. Well, that's just a 2. So I've got 2 plus or minus square root of, that's 4 minus 20. 4 minus 20 is a negative 16 all over 2. All right, so got some imaginary numbers going on here, plus or minus. That's a 4i all over 2. Have a little reducing that can happen because everybody contains a 2. And then my answer would be x equals 1 plus or minus 2i. Not going to get that one by factoring, are we? My goodness. Look at this thing. It is a mess. Well, I'm going to go ahead and factor that denominator on the first one just to see what in the world is going on here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everybody by the common denominator. And that common denominator is going to be, I need an x plus 2 times an x minus 2 all over 1. And I'm going to multiply everybody by this thing. And it's Well, the first term is really nice because all of that cancels. So that first term is just a 1. Second term, this x plus 2 is the thing that cancels, leaving me with x times x minus 2. Then equals 2 times all that stuff. Whoa, that's so ugly. 1 plus x squared minus 2x equals, multiplying that out, 2 times x squared minus 4. Everybody's got to go to one side eventually here, so I'm going to need more room. So I'm going to have, let's see, 1 plus x squared minus 2x equals 2x squared minus 8. I think I'm going to move everything over this way. So 0 equals x minus x squared minus x squared. So that's going to be positive x squared. It'll be add 2x because you're moving over there. Minus 1 from both sides. So I have minus 8 minus 1 is a minus 9. So what I did was minus 1, I minus x squared, and then I added 2x, Whoa. Then I'm going to say A equals B equals, and C equals. Once you get to that point, then you're just using the quadratic formula again. And we've already seen how to do that. So the rest of this is easy. I'm just going to plug it into x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Chunking all that stuff in, minus 2 plus or minus square root of b squared. So that's 2 squared. That's a 4. Minus 4 times a. That's just a 1. And then that's a minus 9 all over 2 times 1. So that's just a 2. Equals minus 2 plus or minus square root of. That'd be plus 36 plus 4. Oh, that's a 40. I like that one. 2. All right, now in that 40, that's a 4 times a 10 where the 4 comes out. And I will get, whoops, I get negative 2 plus or minus 2 under the square root of 10 all over 2. Why did I write a 10? Get rid of that thing. Here, do this. Okay, over 2, like I said. Then everybody contains a 2. So 1, 1, 1. Yay! Minus 1 plus or minus square root of 10x equals. And there we go. All right, if you need any help with these, be sure and email me. They're going to give them to you in all sorts of forms, and your goal is to eventually, I mean, look how long that problem was. Your goal is to make it look like this so that you can put it in the quadratic formula. So you may have to mess with it a bit to get it to that point. All right? Y'all have a wonderful day, and till we meet again, bye now.